Hi there, it's Bob Witeck, and I am an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 58 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. So on today's show, I am beyond thrilled to be hosting Bob Witeck, who is joining us all the way from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. So Bob, are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
I'm going to give it my best shot.
Excellent. So a little bit about Bob. He founded Witeck Communications in 1993, and for the past 25 years, he continues to be recognized as one of the nation's leading business communicators, strategic consultants, and research experts on many aspects of the lives and households of LGBT people, families, and communities. His company often partners with nonprofit organizations, allies, experts, and business leaders to advise major corporations and advocacy groups on their missions, strategies, and messages, and occasional crises. And prior to launching his own business, Bob served as a communications director in the U.S. Senate, as well as a VP at Hill & Knowlton, which is an international public affairs and public relations firm. So, Bob, you're clearly a communications guru, so this podcast is going to be a piece of cake. So, to kick off our interview, tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique.
Well, it's interesting. You nailed it that 25 years ago, I turned a corner in my professional life. I discovered at that time that I was bifurcating my professional and personal lives by dedicating my expertise, my professional skills to consulting with clients and doing, the traditional work of a public affairs and media relations consultant. But I also was contributing and volunteering time to a lot of LGBT causes. And I wanted to, obviously, bring more of my full self to support those and advocate for those causes. And 25 years ago, I decided, why do I have to compartmentalize those two things? Why don't I bring them together?
That's incredible. I mean, you're talking about merging your passions, obviously taking care of your own community, and really leveraging the skills that you gained, working on the Hill, and obviously for, an international public affairs organization and creating your own, right? You have a ton of experience. You're doing some incredible work. Right now, what's that one thing that has you most inspired about your business?
Well, I'd say after 25 years, I think the things that I believed or imagined at that time at the beginning, we flipped the idea of risk and reward. Companies 25 years ago saw engagement with the community and acknowledging or making LGBT people visible was highly risky. Today, it's not at all a risk. It's deeply entwined with reward. And the notion of engaging is not an option. Every organization, institution, media channel that exists today has a point of view and a policy and a cultural engagement with the LGBT community. My mission after 25 years is to make it a better one. At the beginning, it was just to open the door to begin.
Right. And so what are some of those things today that move beyond, clearly it's a necessity, right, to engage LGBTQ folks,
right,
but beyond, writing in, a non-discrimination policy, what are some of the things that really shift a culture within business to create that feeling of belonging?
Well, the great news is actually today, generationally, millennials get it almost instinctively. They don't see a brand or a company succeeding unless it fully embraces everybody. I think some of our best champions today are non-LGBT allies and family members, coworkers, partners, business partners who all think that leaving people behind makes utterly no sense. And that success, and actually in the business world, the word success, of course, is amplified many times over. To be successful, to compete, is to really understand what other people are overlooking. So the real leaders in the space in commerce and in business have been companies that are truly invested in connecting and empowering LGBT leaders to fully achieve their professional success. To me, I think what that does is it creates a whole range of opportunity for people to have economic power, to evidence political power, and to have a truly authentic voice. And companies have given us a platform to do that when, as you and I both know, and having worked in Washington yourself, is that the political sphere is probably a decade behind.
Right.
They're not nearly as engaged in a robust a way. We're still having battles politically that I think business has long ago resolved.
Yeah, and I would add, beyond the political sphere, when you're talking about actual governance in government agencies, they're about 20 or 30 years behind. So,
and after Obama, we closed the chapter on the Obama administration, turned to Trump. There was so much change, obviously, but the engagement was so robust and so porous and so transparent throughout the Obama years that it's like we're in a deep freeze, and we can't believe we've turned back the calendar so far.
Yes, and that's kind of the pendulum that swings depending on political party and what priorities are.
That's right.
So kind of going back to you and starting your business, you talked about, hitting a turning point 25 years ago. Take us back to your origin story. And specifically, what was the motivating factor for you starting your business? Some folks are really purpose-driven. Other folks just kind of said, enough. I'm tired of trying to fit myself into a box, into a culture and an organization that doesn't value my whole self. Like, where do you fall on that? Tell us a little bit more about your motivations.
Rhodes, it's a great question because I think LGBT people appear to me, I've seen some data, but mostly intuitively, I think we're intended to be entrepreneurs. The reason being is simple. It's hard for us to simply take other people's scripts and run with them. I found it a challenge for me to represent clients and issues that I wasn't fully engaged with. I didn't want to leave myself behind. But I also, when you're working for a very large public relations or public affairs firm, you're working on other client issues that may have no relevance in your life. I think it's not unusual 25 years later that young people entering professional worlds, they already get this, what I'm saying. But 25 years ago, that wasn't a conversation that we had. In fact, your professional advancement was just becoming part of that culture there and at that firm and doing a good job within it to rise up through the ranks. But I think a lot of us are square pegs. I just think we are. The sooner we realize it, the sooner we realize we're not suited to be anybody's boss but our own.
Right. I had a guest, and I know that Jonathan Levin, Levitz, who he often says, we're the architects of our own lives, right, in a lot of ways. And so it's only natural. There's a lot of transferable skills to kind of being the architect of your own business. I really liked what you were saying about, just that you wanted to work with clients who resonated with you and really, and continue to do the purpose-driven work that you continue to do today. One of the things that it was surprising for me, reading about millennials and the hope of millennials, I love it because you're right. For many, they really do get, an inclusive culture and why that's important. And yet, I've read some studies around millennials who are LGBT. Around 50% find themselves going back into the closet because of workplace cultures that don't get it yet, right? And so maybe that's mostly the government agencies that are 20 or 30 years behind. I'm curious, in your own business, I know that you give back in tons and tons of different ways, but on the topic of workplace culture, what's one thing that you do in your business right now to create that kind of inclusive environment of belonging, especially for people that often feel excluded by dominant workplace culture?
Well, the one thing I've always done over the last 25 years, we've had a staff that have grown and shrunk. Much smaller today because actually I enjoy being a freer spirit, so I don't really have a lot of arms and legs. But when I've had them, I always encourage everybody to also make sure that they were giving back their time, especially their time, to work on projects that were independent of our clients and our work. Because I wanted to make sure that they were invested in doing things like working for LGBT youth programs, or frankly, getting way outside the LGBT space and working on other issues in their own communities they cared about. I want to make sure that they look like their communities and that they want to give back to the communities they cared about. I had immigrants. I've had 2 or 3 people who have become U.S. citizens on our watch. They went from a child of another society and culture to becoming an American. So the immigrant experience matters. early learning, raising kids. I have no kids of my own, but the idea of not looking out for students and for kids who are vulnerable. So those are the ways I think that I want to make sure that they're figuring out ways, all of us are figuring out ways that we're doing more in our communities.
Yeah, I think just creating that space for staff to have the ability to, if they're doing board service or whatnot, one, it's allowing them to grow in their careers, but also two, it's allowing them to exercise that muscle that really craves having a purpose and seeing immediate benefits to communities that are still not an equal level playing field. And
they're such better professionals and educators. They bring back knowledge that I wouldn't otherwise have. Yes. Sharing knowledge about their lives and communities has made a difference. Having single Black mothers who have worked for me, who are bringing back their experience of faith and struggle, really are important. I just want to make sure I understand how they fit into the work that we're doing.
Yes. So kind of shifting gears a bit and kind of focusing more on your identity and your business. I was hoping you could take us back, maybe over the course of the past 25 years. Much of your business is focused, you've been a pioneer for the LGBT movement, especially in the world of business. So perhaps this doesn't apply, but if it does, could you take us to a time where you were challenged with being a part of the rainbow family and trying to run a business, keeping the revenue stream, the cash flow coming in? Was there ever a time where you felt that you had to kind of cover aspects of your sexual orientation because you were afraid of losing a client, or that you may compromise a business relationship, or you may have felt unsafe? And if you can think of a time, tell us how you worked around it, because I think that will give a lot of our listeners confidence around how they're negotiating how out they can be in their own businesses.
Those are great questions. Let me posit one thing. Once we started our business, we were so identified with our LGBT identities that wasn't really so much a challenge. Not entirely, but most of the time we were involved or engaged in clients that knew we were gay people. Most of us, not all of us. We were a diverse group of people. But the one thing I think the worst thing I ever did, I've made more mistakes than you have pairs of shoes, trust me, or have ever owned. But I think what I had to learn is better listening to younger staff. Because one thing that you have to understand, when a young person walks into an environment, they don't have your life lessons, they don't have your experience, and they certainly don't have your track record. But it doesn't mean they don't have original value and knowledge that you can learn from. And I think I was more impatient at the beginning when I was hearing it than I deserved to be or deserved to say. And so I learned earlier on is I had to have much better reflective listening and to understand where they're coming from. There were opportunities, younger people wanted to do different things than I wanted us to do. In the end, I'm the business owner, so in the end, I get to decide. But at the same time, to motivate people, you have to make sure that you were truly engaged in them in a respectful way. So I had to learn that, which was a good thing, and I think it's a life lesson I keep. Now, it's interesting, one to your point about our identity, I had a client at one term, a law firm, that was asking us to help publicize and expand their reputation. And only in that conversation did they understand that I was gay. And the fellow said to me, the owner or principal of the firm said to me, I've never met a gay person. Of course, I want to quickly add that you know of. Yes. Clearly, he'd probably met many, but never knew it. And I think he had a deep discomfort with it. And ultimately, we didn't work for them for very long. And I felt great about that, because I thought at the end of the day, he would have to make some new judgments, new understanding of people to accept working with me. And I did not want to compromise anything about my values or my experience that would, to fit his narrow view of the world. I thought, in fact, we added far more value because some of the issues I thought he was in employment law, that we were going to begin to experience a great many issues of LGBT discrimination issues in the workplace. And that would be something where he could have shown. That's
a great example that you shared. Even when you're leading with, we're serving LGBT communities, our values are values of inclusivity, there's this implicitly kind of being out, right? Like, this is my business, right. This is what I do. And
that's right.
You've had a client seek you out. And maybe they didn't kind of read everything that was on your website, or however they were attracted to working with you.
Right.
And,
right.
You're casually mentioning, that you're gay, right? And all of a sudden the record kind of scratches. So I think, there, certainly, we've had other guests who've shared some kind of very, very specific incidents of discrimination or microaggressions. And I think your example is helpful as well. But what's great about, and what is great about what you're doing is it's very obvious, like, that you're serving LGBT communities in business, and you're being, those clients that see that value are immediately attracted to you. So to talk about your family, or to talk about your staff, or, the members who are out within the Rainbow family, it's easy, right? And so I think that's helpful, and I think inspiring for our audience, just to consider all the different angles of, writing what your values are, and also not just not assuming that even if you've kind of explicitly said, in writing or on a podcast or whatnot, that you're a member of the Rainbow family, that not everyone's going to read all of that. So to exercise caution too. And
well, we discover again, don't we, that coming out is a lifelong journey. We find with so many people, we have 100 new ways of not explaining, but describing the values and joys that we have in our lives. And that we have so much, some unique value to bring to the story. What I always discover, too, is that no matter what company or institution or client I'm working with, they are facing values challenges in a variety of ways. And I think what it does in our discussions is bring a clear reflection of what I already think is a commitment, a dedication to getting it right, to being authentic, and to being inclusive. Applies to so many other choices people make. And those are issues that I think we take, they're instinctual with us, but they should apply to things like dealing with single women raising kids, or people of color, or people who are working in the United States undocumented. All of these have some commonalities about them, and also distinct cultural frames, but they still share a lot of values.
Yeah, I think that's so right on, that beyond talking about LGBT communities, and this is what I think, amongst many other things that millennials contribute, is that the intersectionality piece, that when we're talking about trying to get it right and be authentic and inclusive of LGBT communities, those same principles do apply for communities of color, for people of different abilities, different faiths, et cetera, et cetera. Connecting those dots, millennials seem to get. And so if we can somehow download that ability for, different people in the workplace based on generations, I think we're all going to be better off.
I think contemporary gay leadership, contemporary LGBTQ leadership requires stretching those values into a lot of other experiences. Those of us who fail to do that, I don't think are worthy of being leaders. Absolutely. I think the whole concept of leading means putting other people's skin around yours.
Absolutely. And that's what I love when you're talking about, really listening to younger people, because that's where younger people have their fingers on the pulse of what the future holds, right? And if we're not paying attention to that, we're missing something huge, right? So, this show is all about empowerment. So I want to take a moment for you to kind of reflect on what it means to be an out boss from the aspect of thinking about, your lived experiences as being assets to what you do in business. So, specifically, what are some of the strengths that you've gained from your own lived experiences of being an out gay man that are really invaluable to you in the world of business?
I think a couple things. For one thing, you think in the business of different stakeholders. And what I try to do as a LGBTQ leader is to imagine all those stakeholder groups. And I think what you end up doing is you imagine the LGBTQ people among you are playing all those different roles in business. They're customers, they're investors, they're professional leaders, executives, they're consumers, they're households. And I think what it does is reminds us that it's not cut and dried, that these are complex motivations and they're complex needs. And they're all surrounded by one thing, of getting it right, but also making it relevant. And I think when I talk to those who want to market to the LGBT communities, and of course they're fragmented and diverse communities within, it's marketing 101. It's knowing your customer. I think it's a lifelong learning issue too for us in business, because the transgender conversation underway today in education is profoundly changing all the things we ever learned about gender roles in business, which is very exciting to me, because getting this right is going to change a lot, I think, for the long journey that women had to be treated equally in the workplace. It's part of the same journey, but it's accelerating the conversation.
I agree. And in the work that I do, it's magical when business leaders in particular have those light bulb moments of recognizing that traditional gender roles in a lot of ways limit everyone, and that kind of the conversations when really understanding trans and non-binary communities, it opens up a different world and creates some more freedom for everyone. And so I love that you brought that up. For our listeners, considering some of the challenges that you talked about, even when you're 100% out in your business, and obviously all of the blessings that come with being an out boss, what do you want the audience to really take away to inspire them to be more authentic in their own work?
Two things I think come quickly to mind. One is authenticity is practiced. So you learn it day to day. You do it in little and big ways. And so it's as much as the conversations you have, the work that you choose, the way you connect with your boss and your coworkers. That is authenticity you can practice constantly, and you get better at it all the time. The second part is to do it without fear. And by that, I mean, have people around you, a mentor, a superior, a colleague, who gives you safe space to even talk through these things. Because some of this does require a net. I worry that people will, bring their full selves to work, which I hope they can do, but I also want them to keep their jobs. I want them to be understood. I want them to make sure that they understand that they have to do it with confidence, but not take risks that would cost them some painfulness. And to me, we have such a risk for people, especially people who are either transgender or non-binary, not getting employment. So for me, I want to make sure that we find opportunities for people to be authentic, but also be successful.
I think that's really, really powerful. That kind of, it's authenticity, like you said, is being practiced. And it's also, understanding where you're at right now, especially if you're not. I know a lot of folks that are listening have kind of a side hustle or a side business, and they're thinking about breaking out and doing it full time.
Right.
If you're working as an employee for someone else, the job security piece is huge. I'm glad you touched on that, and just making sure that you're making calculated risks and being as authentic as you can while still maintaining your livelihood. And only kind of what that level of safety looks like, right? So
and more people are able to transition on the job, but you really or walk into a new job where you have transitioned, to know that some organizations and workforces are sophisticated and they've worked through these issues. Others just haven't yet.
Yes.
And so I want to be very mindful that those choices we make to be ourselves and to affect our identities have to be done with the knowledge that the culture around you has to be able to do it with you.
Yes, 100%. So one more question before we go to a sponsorship break. I know that you give back to LGBT communities in so many different ways. From the business lens, can you share just one way that you're helping make the world better for us?
Well, I'd like to think that the volunteerism we all do, and I serve on boards and programs that I care about. I give a lot of advice to individuals to help. But the other way I want to say is that giving my thoughts to expressing them through the research we do. We are doing a great deal advocating and executing research that gives people metrics that they can use in the business environment that I think make the business case. And I think that's going to continue to be very important.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so I want to keep talking, and we will, but we're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now. And for our listeners, please don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're going to get to know Bob a little bit better and learn a couple of ways that we can stay in touch with his business. Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss. Welcome back, out bosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Bob a little bit better. We're going to gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work. And then we're going to learn one way to stay in touch with Bob after the conversation. All right, Bob, are you ready for the quick fire questions?
I'm going to try. I don't want to disappoint you. I hope I live up to your expectations.
You've got this.
Okay.
So in one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
Well, I would say be more like Judi Dench.
Yes.
Judi Dench, I'm being funny, of course, but the one thing about Judi Dench, I have a T-shirt that I take a workout in the gym, and it says, "Stay Dench." And people would ask me, what does that mean? Well, to me, I think is you get a place in life, as I am at my age and longevity, is that you're not on the way to any place anymore. You are where you are, and you want to be fierce and you want to be proud, but you also want to be humble by the idea that you're spending your whole life learning.
Yeah, I love that. The more comfortable you can be in your skin,
Absolutely.
You can definitely stay dench. I love that.
That's right.
So what's a mantra or quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business?
I should have used that one, stay dench. No, but I would say I'm not sure I subscribe to a mantra or a quote. What I try to do every day is wake up and make the day a fresh one. It's a fresh slate. Because sometimes people ask you this, Rhodes, and they'll say, what's your typical day? If anybody has a typical day, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Unless you're a barista and you've made a billion, lattes. But for me, a typical day never exists. So to me, I love the morning. I love to get up and just say, start fresh every day.
I love that. And so I usually ask about personal habits. So maybe expanding on the morning ritual. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like?
My husband taught me this. He and I have been together 23 years. And maybe I was a morning person, but he really, really is. And so I'm up and out, out of the door by 6 something. Because I get up between 5 and 6. And then, you know what happens? You discover that there's a whole part of the day that you own that nobody else owns.
Yeah.
You can actually get things done. I can get to the gym. I can get to my desk. I can start completing projects that I've started the day before. And I have the world that I own it.
Yep.
Just that moment.
Yeah, there's something magical about those early morning hours for sure.
Yep.
So name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
Oh, my goodness. That's a great question. I would say everything about running the business. In other words, payroll, accounting, all those things that I don't think I have a mind for. The barrier for me becoming an entrepreneur, starting a business, was all those things that you have to do. You have to pay your taxes. You have to have a payroll. You have to have, obedience to local regs, and you have to be incorporated. And you have to pay your taxes, right? So you have to do all that. So I would tell every entrepreneur, guess what? There are people who can do all those things, and you don't have to do them. Yes. You have to be mindful and religious about obeying all those things, but you have to have people who can do that for you, and they are so eager to do it. And in the gay community, there's so many great people who are involved in chambers. You can find an LGBT practitioner to help with anything you need.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice around an LGBT chamber, small business development centers.
Absolutely.
All across the country. So, as you're thinking about getting started, for those folks that haven't yet, really reach out and consider those free resources first and make sure that that's what you want to do. And it's a calculated risk, and set up the structures right from the beginning. So and you can do your magic. Yeah.
Failure is always a possibility, but it's not the worst thing that can happen.
Right.
So you've got to be a person who every day of your life enjoys risk.
Yes, absolutely. So before we got recording, we were talking about books. And so I know that you're an avid reader. Can you share a book that has really resonated for you and has contributed to your success as an outboss?
No. Only because I don't believe in reading business books at all. And I don't read self-help and advice books. I don't read any of those. Not because I don't think they have value. I think they probably have value to a lot of people. But I find them a bit, let's put it this way, there's a lot of common sense. Or at least I'm so arrogant that I think I already understand them. But what I love to read are biographies and histories, because to me, the knowledge that, for example, a great book that I've really inspired by is called They Took My Everything. I think that's the title, but it's about the notion of white people in the South in the 1950s and 60s when integration was beginning, is what they feared they were losing. If black people were treated equally under the law, what would they no longer have? And the reason I like that is because I want to be mindful that as we try to advance LGBT rights and acceptance, is that some people in our midst, in our families or around us, believe that it means if I have my rights, they have fewer. I've learned a lot in terms of how conversations happen, how families talk to each other, and how culture changes. And to me, I love the real world understanding of how real attitudes get shaped. And so race, I read a lot about race. I read a lot about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. There are aspects of all those the ugliness in each of those and the power of change to affect them. And I've learned a lot about other societies and communities that I think impact my take on where we are today.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you're talking about in terms of the books that you're reading. They don't have to be business books, but the things that inspire you and that you can obviously adapt to your life to be a better person, but and to your business. Sometimes the solutions could be in a Harry Potter book for something that you're trying to work through.
It can be. And also I read books for good writing, because to me, I tell staff who want to learn to be better writers, you got to be a great reader.
Yes.
Because if you read good writing, you'll know what it is. It's the writing that lifts you up and inspires you and educates you.
Yes.
So you will learn lessons there.
Yes. 2 more questions for you. The first, can you share a piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Yes, I think there are 2 things you can do. One, first of all, know that it's possible. I mean, I was going to say the world is filled with everybody's taking that risk. So you are not alone. You're never alone. But do 2 things. Do something you really love and do something that people really want. Because, I mean, obviously, if you're doing something you love but no one wants to buy it, it's a service or a product, it's not going to really take off. You don't have to be the best at it. You just have to be the best that you can be at it. And you will get so much reward and so much satisfaction from that. After 25 years, I could not imagine working for somebody else.
Yes. Yeah. At some point, I think as an entrepreneur, you kind of work yourself out of being employable. So
you do?
Yeah.
You do?
I think, yeah. You don't have to be the best, but you have to be for you. You have to just put your best foot forward. So it's progress and not perfection. I think that's great advice. So
right.
Bob, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with your business?
Well, of course.
Thank you.
The one thing, I'm on the web at Witeck.com, which is a sublime address that my nephew got at the domain, Witeck, Witeck.com. So that's one way. And I'm also on Twitter at Bob __ and then Witeck. Easy to find on Twitter. I like Twitter a lot because to me, it has brought me a universe of information and knowledge, and especially with journalists, that I find incredibly timely and important. Yeah. So I do like it as a tool. I'm not sure it's everybody's, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's how we got connected, through Twitter. So
that's right.
I think it's a great way to stay in touch. So for our audience, definitely consider visiting Bob's business webpage and also check him out and follow him on Twitter. And for everyone, thank you so much again for tuning into this week's episode. It's always my privilege to connect you with so many inspiring outbosses like Bob. So for further details for today's conversation, definitely check out the show notes at outentrepreneur.com. And as a next step, subscribe to the podcast, consider leaving a rating and review, and be sure to share the podcast with a friend or a loved one. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.